I know, I was like, I don't think he knows who I am yet. I gotta get closer.
This makes me think about the people I need to reach out to. It's like, okay. Well, Hannah's going to get back to us on that. And then we need to kick it back here like a week before. I was actually ordering like
Yeah. It's really cool.
yeah.
Have you been to the photo room?
I haven't, but I saw a picture of it. That's it. Now it's on mute, so it can just be on and then you do this. Close it in it?
I mean, I think it would be cool just like some information.
Quick question, would you guys want me to introduce you, or did you want to do that?
We were just talking about it. I think we got it.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. No, I just don't want to accidentally grab it.
Has that got a red box around it? Has that got a red box around it? Screen? Oh, you just look at it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Miss it? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 Oregon Active Transportation Summit, Move into Action. Our session will start in just a moment, but first I want to remind you about the closing reception and marshals. Starting after the 3:30 to 4:30 sessions wrap up, we'll have happy hour snacks, and if you have a red ticket and your name badge, you can trade that in for a free drink at the bar.
We're probably going to give it just a moment because there's a very important presentation happening over there, and we want people to realize that presentation is actually very boring, and then they're going to come over here and hear about our fantastic programmatic offering. So we'll give you all just a moment to really settle into your seats here.
They also announced that Lynn had to leave early, so I don't think she's going to be running her whole presentation trying to say all that stuff.
We are all ready to go. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. We are with the Community Cycling Center from here in Portland. And my name is William Francis. I'm Programs Director there. My pronouns are he, him. And a little bit of background, I've been in the active transportation field since 2013. I actually used to work for the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, which is now the Street Trust. Then later got a Safe Routes to School coordinator position at the Community Cycling Center, and now I have my current position. I'm going to pass it off to Hanna.
Hey y'all, Hanna Howsmon, pronouns are she, they. I am our education manager here at the Cycling Center. My background is in teaching, so I taught at a Title I school in Brooklyn, New York before coming over here. I'm excited to be here with you all today.
And my name is Lloyd. I am the volunteer and event manager now with the Cycling Center. I'm also formerly worked in classrooms in Title I-A schools in Portland, which I bring that education experience to our STEM program where I'm now an instructor. One thing that's a little bit different about us than a lot of the other groups that you might have experience with hearing a presentation is that we're all direct service providers. So we don't really speak publicly all the time. We mostly work with kids pretty directly to provide services, which is why we are going to start with getting you all engaged in our presentation. So I'm going to ask you to either pair up with someone or form one group of three because we're going to talk about summer camp experience and what that summer camp experience is like. I said before that we are direct service providers, which means that I can see you and I see you not pairing up. So find a partner. Get comfortable with that partner, work in a group of three. We're going to start by talking about summer camp experience, what that experience is like for you, how you engaged with summer camp when you were in it. So I'll give you a moment here to form a group of some kind.
Yeah, I've been to a couple. One was like Christian camp, which is funny because I'm no longer and then the second was like a pretty expensive, like really like activity focused summer camp. So they were very different experiences, I'd say. One was definitely more like for learning, and the other was just like really fun. Made a lot of sense.
Hello, we are partnering up in groups and talking about
Reminded me that I did go to two different types of summer camps actually as well.
Correct.
It's just like random activities and always activity and then I also did like a summer.
Okay.
They were very different actually.
So I'll have you report back in just about a minute, but to give you some more things to think about when framing this conversation about what summer camp experiences that you have in the past are like, one of the things we want you to think about is how place related to those summer camps. So specifically how the people that put on the camp related to the place the camp was run, how long it might have taken you to get to the camp, and then how did you get to the camp? Did you take a bus? Did you use public transportation? What kind of things brought you to the place? How was that place involved in the programming that happened at the camp? And then in just about a minute, we'll call you all back together and then share out from the groups. Thank you.
Oh, and then your group went to summer camp. Is there another thing we can answer?
Yeah, if no one in your group went to summer camp, thinking about common sort of public media perceptions about summer camp is also a totally fine way to frame the discussion. Yeah. And hopefully you'll learn from the other groups about what a delightful experience summer camp can be. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about the differences in camps that we went to. Both of us have kind of been to more like a learning camp, and then we've also been to like fun outdoors camp as well. So
That reminded me, I've also been to a Girl Scout camp, but I didn't like it because they like forced you to do things. They made me wear a skirt and like I don't like it. They're so rigid, you know. It's like
Right.
Yeah,
This is how we do this. This is how we do that. Yeah, got it.
With what he just said, though, like we always had to drive to the camp. That's where I felt it was like I mean transportation. So it was always really fun.
Yeah, I grew up in South.
All right, folks, we're going to call you back together to share out from your groups. So if you don't mind turning back and giving us your attention, that would be great. And then if one person from each group wants to volunteer to be the speaker, we can start sharing back together as a group what your summer camp discussion looked like.
Sure, first, I guess. We kind of talked about the fact that like a few of us have been both to camps where it's like a learning environment, but we've also been to camps where it's more of a fun, like outdoors environment. All of us were driven to the camps that we went to. But yeah, kind of two different vibes of camp.
Yeah, so learning camps and non-learning camps, but primarily folks who are driven to the camps. Cool.
So we don't have a lot of experience in our group, but I went to a day camp a few times, and basically a school bus from a youth center downtown that I was a member of out to a small camp that was on the lake.
Awesome, yeah. Day camps where you were bused from the day camp in an urban area out to a more rural area.
Yeah, so neither of us had like a nature camp experience. Our group had like a sports camp experience, but we thought it was interesting because we were both like envisioning this prompt as more of like the nature camp. Like when we hear summer camp, we think of like, you know, you're outdoors in the wilderness. So it was just kind of interesting that that was immediately what we went to, and we're like, we've never had that experience. As far as transportation for sports camps, how did you get there? By car.
Sweet. So thinking about the difference of a sports camp, which is more urban, compared to the general media representation, which is a more rural sort of, you know, by the lakeside camp, and then being driven to those more urban camps. Cool.
We both went to a camp that was like in a nature area that we both had to get driven there. And yeah, it was far, but both got right there.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you folks for participating and talking about how you got to more like rural nature camps, being driven there. We'll talk about our model of camp, which is a little bit different, but to get to how we have developed this model of more integrated suburban and urban camp, we first have to start with telling you about the history of the cycling center and how we got to that point. And William is going to do that.
Sweet. So, yeah, hold some of those things in your mind. I think as I go into what our bike camp looks like and how it works, you'll see a lot of these themes popping up. So anyway, to start, I have some prepared things to go a little bit into the history of the Community Cycling Center. So we officially opened our doors to the community in 1994. You can see a picture there of Brian Lacey, our founder, and the storefront, and actually it was on 24th in Alberta in northeast Portland, and later moved to our current location at 17th in Alberta, so just a few streets down. So out of the shop space, we offered programs to neighborhood residents towards our mission of reducing barriers to bicycling and accessing its benefits. At the time, Portlanders who were and still are facing the greatest barriers to bicycling, Black people, people of color, speakers of language other than English, and low-income earners, were living in the same neighborhood as the shop. And as time passed, gentrification occurred and pushed former residents, primarily Black folk, because if you're aware of how housing has worked in Portland, redlining pushed Black folk into Northeast, and as things gentrified, as prices rose, folks left that neighborhood. So, Hannah's going to talk here in a minute. I'm going to pass it off to her next to talk about our community-based free bike programming, but I'm going to show you all a bunch of pictures of our fee-for-service bike camp that we've ran. It got started in 2001. So you can see some photos here of basically the same spot in the back of our shop here. There's a little parking lot in the back, and that's where we staged all of our camps at. So you can see two different groups there, one from 2009, one from 2014, lined up there. And then next slide there, just to give you an idea of kind of the setup here, kids would arrive on Monday, their parents would drive them there, usually bring their bike, and then after each day of the camp that week, we would store their bikes in the basement. And then one of the rituals of instructors every morning was to get there and bring them up. And you can kind of see some of them lined up right there. And then you can see back there. So there's several groups there. And you can go to the next slide here. You can see that one of the first things that we do with the group is we create this full value contract with them. So the three components of this are fun, safety, and respect. And so thinking again back to your camp experience, those are kind of like the fundamental ingredients to having a good time. Obviously, if you're not being safe, it's not going to be very fun. And if you aren't having respect for each other, then it might not be safe. And they all kind of relate to each other. So jumping back a little bit, we first began to offer this fee-for-service bike camp in 2001, as I was saying. And the idea was that the proceeds from that camp, along with the profits from our bike shop, would go to subsidize the free community-based programming that we offered. So up until 2019, we primarily hosted this bike camp program out of the back of the parking lot, like I was saying. And throughout those 18 years of operation, I just made a conservative estimate. And if we're going to go with 4 camp groups, like I was showing them before, 4 of those groups, there's 12 kids possible in each group. There's 10 weeks in the summer. So over those years, my estimate is we were teaching around 8,500 kids. That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of hours. So we worked a lot of bugs out in that process. These was kids learning how to use their bike as a tool primarily to get around town, be healthy, and just have a good time being a kid on a bike. And I also want to point out and acknowledge just throughout all those years, all of our instructor staff that helped us figure out how to move kids around on bikes so that it doesn't take a million years to go down, a couple blocks. So it would not have been possible without these folk. And they worked really hard, and you can see a group right here. We've got an instructor in front, and then you can see back there we had an instructor in the back, probably somebody doing an observation there. But you can see we rode single file there. Everybody's really close right now because they're stopped, but as we ride, we create what we call ghost space. So that's one little kind of campy thing, and that's an imaginary space between you and the bike in front of you when you're moving so that you don't turn into bumper cars. So we can go to the next slide here. You can see that we would do camp t-shirts for everybody. So this is just one example. If you go to the next slide, you're going to see me when I was a little kid. No, that was a joke. I was a camp instructor that year, though. I have the gear to prove it. Here, go back really quick, last one. Just want to point out another quintessential camp experience. We have some kids getting their ice cream on the last day of bike camp. So we would bring out a little icicle tricycle out there, and everybody had to give us a bike part, and then they got a ice cream. Next slide here. Obviously, these camps are in the summer, so it gets hot. We do a lot of getting wet and taking kids to water features around Portland, too. Next slide. Here you can see us at some parks. We have some story time on the left there. We have some snack time on the right. A lot of sit-down games. Next slide there. You can see we're playing a game here at Alberta Park, and this is called our slow race. So the last person to cross the finish line wins, not the first person, the last one. So it's kind of a balanced game. A lot of the stuff that we would do in bike camp, is intentionally non-competitive. So we're trying to do things together as a team is really the focus there. You can see we have an instructor and 2 campers doing some map reading here. So another component of that, this program is learning your surroundings and how to get from point A to point B, knowing where you came from, all of that good stuff. Next slide here. We visit a lot of natural areas, referring back to what you all were talking about for camp experience. So this is, I think, this Elk Rock. Next slide. We would go downtown. So this is kind of an advanced riders group there in the bike lane downtown. And then a lot of bridge riding, because obviously Portland has some really beautiful bridges. We would take the Max to get to places that we couldn't get on our bike, go a little bit further. And then we have a food cart camp where kids get an allotment of money, and then they have to figure out how to budget it and pool up the remaining money to buy a dessert together or something like that. So they go around to the different food carts. I think this is us at Whitaker Ponds doing some science in the ponds there with probably a partner. And then we were petting the goats near the shop in the King neighborhood. And then just working at Sugar Wheel Works with a girls camp. And then you can see some of the kids doing the mechanics camp on the left there in our shop, and a flat fix there. And then this last slide is actually some kids playing some bike polo, because we had a bike camp instructor who played a lot of polo. So those are some good photos to show what we did. Here. So the time-tested institutional knowledge around how to facilitate safe and fun on-bike experiences with youth has allowed our staff to focus on other aspects of youth programming. If you know exactly where to position yourself in the street as an instructor relative to the group and your co-instructor, because you've been trained and you've done it a million times, you don't have to think about that as much, and you can actually think about other things, like, for example, maybe there is a kiddo in the back of the line who's slouched over and is not having a good day. You need to come up with a plan to pick that kid's spirits up and get them back involved in the group. But if you're concerned about all the cars moving around you at the same time, it's hard to do both. So I'm just pointing out that those 20 years of experience, 8,500 kids, that's a lot of bugs getting worked out there, and a lot of figuring out this logistics of how we move, so that we can think about all the other things that are part of bike camp, because just knowing that is not going to be adequate for a positive experience. So here, we can go to the next slide. So in 2012, our Understanding Barriers to Bicycling report marked a significant shift in the level of investment of the Community Cycling Center in low-income communities of color further out from the city center, where pedestrian and bicycle-friendly infrastructure is more lacking. There's also the neighborhoods where many former residents around the Community Cycling Center on Alberta Street had been gentrified into, so we were going out into those communities. Across time, our bike camp offered out of the Alberta Street shop just sort of kind of increasingly became difficult to access for the families facing the greatest barriers to bicycling in Portland. There are attempts to make scholarship spots in our camps out of the shop, but separating youth from their familiar environments was less than ideal for a number of reasons that Hanna will touch on here in a minute. It became apparent that in order to truly center our bike camp program around the needs of lower income youth of color and their families, we needed to host those programs out of the spaces near to where families are living. I'm going to hand it off to Hanna here so she can tell us more about our most recent versions of free to participants community-based bike camp programming, and she's going to talk about a specific case study example too. So passing it off.
Thanks, William and Pax. So I'm here to talk about kind of our transition within our camp model and what that really looks like in practice through a case study example. So what William was talking about was what we refer to as a fee-for-service bike camp. Families pay, they come to camp, they get their fun camp experience as a service, and then they leave. What we are honing in on now is what we refer to as a community camp model. We'll talk about kind of what those differences are through our case study, but really we have up at the top here a photo of the bike shop, and when we did our fee-for-service camp, and campers came to us, to our shop, their parents, family members drove them and their bikes to us for camp, versus community camp when we go out to 122nd and Holgate, deep southeast Portland, to be doing community-based camps with low-income communities of color through Title I-A schools, affordable housing agencies, to really meet communities where they are. This is Leander Court Apartments that we'll talk about in a little bit, and this is just the general courtyard that you see when you go into the parking lot and families go in through the doors to go home. So kind of how did we get here, right? How do we go from fee-for-service to entirely community-based camp? That transition really happened in kind of the height of the pandemic years. So 2020, COVID hits, we pause all camp programming just because of constraints. We were doing a lot of like refunding fee-for-service tuition or, postponing that into the next year. And really trying to do that engagement work in a respectful and responsible way to say, hey, community camp partners, what's the vibe? What do y'all want this year? And they're like, yeah, no, please, let's just focus on health and safety. And so we listened and we did that. 2021 was a little bit of a game changer because we had vaccines and really like there was this huge need for enrichment programming that still very much existed. And, we're this small nonprofit that survived the pandemic, and we only have so many resources, and we said, yeah, let's prioritize need. That is in alignment with our other programs that we offer. So we said, we're not going to be doing fee-for-service. We're just going to be doing community camp. It's going to be a small kind of scale. We only did 4 camps that year, which we always were doing community camps, but it was a very small subset of fee-for-service. But we just said, we're going to funnel all of our resources and efforts and time into these programs. Because, what happens when you refund tuition for a fee-for-service camp family? They go and they register for another camp, and they pay for another camp. But what happens when you cancel a free service to families who are relying kind of on that enrichment, that childcare experience? They lose out. And that's not in alignment with our values. So we prioritize that need there. In 2022, as things kind of started to open up a bit more, we did keep that focus on community camps. We were in 5 community camps last summer. And we also kind of dallied in, like, what if we do a small-scale fee-for-service? What if we contract ourselves out to an existing camp like OMSI, and we're just doing, maybe a couple weeks with them? Our learnings were that with our small team, that still really divides our time and resources. We really can't do both super well. A lot of kind of that administrative need for a fee-for-service camp is fixed. So here for 2023, we are doing a full summer of community camp. We're really excited to be doing that, and that will be 7 camps starting when PPS ends. So if we could go to the next slide. Now we'll talk about what does community camp look like on a day-to-day kind of through this case study. So first, I'd love for us to just maybe look at this image that I pulled from our trusty favorite Google Maps Street View. I want you to think about, what does this image bring to mind? What might you think the cycling experience would be like here versus perhaps where we are in inner Northeast? Anyone want to share?
Fast cars.
Fast cars, yep.
Also, doors opening up into the bike lane.
That door zone, we hate to see it. Gravel in the bike lane, glass, lots of glass. Big freight trucks. Hashtag 122nd Avenue. Yeah, so for a lot of reasons, right, there are a lot more barriers to accessing cycling, accessing transportation modes within a community camp setting, right? There are barriers in terms of what is the actual infrastructure nearby that you would be cycling in, which kind of goes back to that higher need, right? There's more impact if you're focusing there. And also there's the barrier to accessing our bike shop, which is in that inner Northeast kind of nice gridded area of the city. So by bringing our camp to communities where they're actually living, where they're actually riding their bikes and walking and all that good stuff anyway, we're able to meet them where they're at, ask them, where do you want to ride? Show them how to do that safely, and kind of meet that need of families so that we're not saying, hey, trek your kids out, 30 minutes every single day, go out of your way to do this. It's also a childcare kind of support there. So this is an image of Leander Court Apartments, like I mentioned earlier. They're off 122nd and Holgate, deep southeast Portland. We came across this partnership through an existing collaboration with Urban Nature Partners PDX. They're a local mentorship group, and so they connect with underserved youth in Portland to match mentors with students who really could stand to benefit from that one-on-one relationship kind of throughout their lifetime. So they've always sort of supported us with recruitment. They said, hey, you know, we have these kids in this neighborhood, they'd be a great fit for your camp, and we say, great, welcome to camp. And they said, you know, check out our friends over at Rose CDC. We have some youth there that would really benefit from a bike camp. They have their own fleet. They have a staff member who you can, you know, they can join you on the ride. So they really made it pretty compelling, and we were like, all right, we'll add another camp. We'll try this out. And they've become kind of one of our most just beloved and endeared partnerships over the years. And really, it's this kind of mishmash of all of our different community organizations that are able to support families and kids holistically. So between the 3-4 organizations that are involved, we know what are the needs of families? What wraparound services can we connect to families in order to minimize not just barriers to biking and transportation, but all the barriers in their lives that may or may not be present. We're also able to connect on relationships, right? We're there for like a week of camp, maybe a few events here and there. But staff at CBOs or housing authorities or in a after-school program, they're with the kids day in, day out. They know all the dynamics that might be, you know, popping up. They know this kid needs a lot of stimulation to stay involved, to give this kid an important role, to make them really feel valued. It also really helps with recruitment and identifying who are the youth and families who stand to benefit most. Maybe a classroom environment isn't the most stimulating or rewarding environment for them, but something like a bike camp where it is hands-on learning all the time, like it's really rewarding and really impactful for a kid who's maybe told no or you're not doing the right thing for a lot of their school career. So that's kind of our case study at Rose CDC. We felt that there is a lot to celebrate with that program, and I also just want to give a shout out to our partners over at Rose CDC. Candace Rose, if you ever happen to see this, you are a superstar. Candace makes this partnership possible and has joined literally every ride that we've been on with the Rose CDC kids, which is amazing. So just, if we want to, thank you, Pex. Just kind of looking at some of the community camp successes, right? Like we've transitioned into this model. Why are we still pursuing it? Why is this what is moving forward? Really, we are offering a consistent, predictable schedule of summer enrichment activities. That's what we are aiming to do kind of over the years as we expand and continue deep partnerships with our community camp model. So that way, families in Coley know, June, bike camp happens, and I'm going to kind of save that part of my summer off for bike camp. We know that it's impactful because our partners are coming back to us year after year after year saying, what's up? What's happening with bike camp? How do we sign up? And they're not just asking about camp, they're asking about what are the other enrichment events we can do throughout the year. Right? Like, I heard this cool bike event was happening. Can you guys help us get there? And we try to make that happen whenever it's feasible. And just always love to shout out other program successes. We've been doing a lot more Learn to Ride events because we know that's a barrier, right? How are you going to participate in bike camp if you don't know how to ride a bike? That is a pretty big issue that we run into. So at least 4 of the kids at Leander were bike club or were Learn to Ride success stories, so to speak. So we met them at a Learn to Ride event. They got up and pedaling, and now they are riding over 13 miles in a camp day with the whole camp crew, which is really great to see. So I will pass this over to Pax to shine the light on some of our other great community-based programs that are in alignment with this community camp model.
Okay, thank you, folks. So those community camps engage in one method of problem solving. I could talk for a really long time about all of the other programs that are here on the slide, but I will confine myself so that you are able to continue about your afternoons. We tried to solve a series of problems with our other programmatic offerings that sort of naturally emerge when you're thinking about on-bike programming from a social justice lens. One of those is, how do you get kids bicycles? So our holiday bike drive strives to solve that problem. How do you get older kids involved? How do you get them high school credit for working on a bike? Our STEM program works to solve that problem. How do you then make sure that you're engaging people in a community consistently? Our hub in New Columbia solves that problem. And then how do you actualize and work with a community that is already working to solve that problem for themselves? Our partnership with ABC works to solve that problem. So I'm going to start with our holiday bike drive. So we are, as a nonprofit, work to make sure that we're using volunteer labor effectively. It's hard to work on a geared bike with cabled brakes, but kids' bikes present an excellent format for volunteers to get involved with to work up their mechanical skills, because it's basically just a series of bearing systems. Your bottom bracket rotates, your headset rotates, your pedals rotate, things like that, and then you have a rear coaster brake hub, which is the most difficult part of that. So if you have volunteers who are consistently able to show up, come to our shop on 17th and Alberta on Tuesday evenings and work on those bikes, you can produce 500 bikes every year really consistently with consistent volunteer support. And then if you're able to partner with the trauma nurses and the fantastic hospital administrators at Legacy Emmanuel, you have a space to give away those 500 bikes every year in December. And that's what we've been doing for the better part of 20 years out of Legacy Emmanuel. Since the pandemic, our location has changed, but our dedication to giving away hundreds of kids' bikes every year hasn't. So we've worked with a number of our community-based organizations, CBOs, to find kids who need a bike, who are relatively small in that learn-to-ride age, and make sure they can take a bike home. And due to the Legacy trauma nurses giving away helmets, making sure they're taking a helmet home. And then after the pandemic, we've also been able to teach kids to learn to ride at those holiday bike drives. So making it a more encompassing event, making sure that kids are really supported throughout the process of getting that bike and knowing how to use it. Our STEM program pairs with local high schools, alternative high schools, to get kids credit during an elective course while they learn to work on bicycles. They learn some basic physics concepts like, friction, parallel motion, things like that. But what we're teaching them is a really practical skill. How do you work on a bike? What is it like to operate a bike shop? How do you, where do you get bikes from? How are we working on these bikes? How many bikes can you produce in a day? Things like that. So we make sure that through our sustained partnerships with Alliance at Meek and Helensview High School, Rosemary Anderson in the New Columbia neighborhood, that we're engaging older high school students who might already have an idea of how to ride a bike, and they're more interested in getting high school credit and then getting out. And some of them we pair with over the course of a number of years. Through our internship and apprenticeship programs, we bring them into the shop and they work with us at our shop to gain and continue to actualize those skills. So the STEM program is a great way to bring older kids into the sort of bicycle ecosystem that we're creating here. But then how do we make sure that we're supporting a community with this kind of bicycle repair? Because a lot of people, they get a bike at the holiday bike drive or they buy a bike, but then a tire goes flat. And they don't really live anywhere near a bike shop, or they get done with school after it's dark and they don't want to, take public transit a long way because you have to put your bike on the thing, and that can be a little bit intimidating. So in 2010, we started working in the New Columbia community to try to make sure that they had the access to bicycles that we work every day to make sure that everybody has. And part of that really happened when there was a vacant lot in the New Columbia area that became a bicycle skills park and a basketball area and tennis courts as well. So we were able to put a hub there that is consistently engaging every kind of community member from May to September. So consistently, kids in the New Columbia area know that basically at the end of their school year, through summer to the beginning of their school year, they can get bicycles repaired at our hub in New Columbia. Anybody passing by, if you happen to be on like a long ride because you're training to do a century next week and you happen to catch a flat near the hub in New Columbia, we would also help you work on your bike. It's basically just community-based bicycle repair, and as we've been doing that for more than a decade now, we have brought the same people there and started to build real durable relationships. You teach a kid to learn to ride, and then they come to the hub for a couple of years, and then they're in a STEM classroom. Or they continue to show up at the hub every summer, and then they apply for an internship, and then you're able to get them a job, which is one thing that's happened, which is super great to see. So how do you consistently show up for a community rather than just providing them that one-off service, which is how a lot of nonprofit work starts? So continuing to think forward. Our partnership with ABC, Andando en Bici y Caminando, is a great partnership that we've been able to maintain. We provide compensation for 30 hours a week for someone to coordinate that group and make sure that they continue to have the support that they need to advocate for bicycling in their community. So in the Cully neighborhood, it's a lot like that area around 122nd that Hanna showed earlier, where it can be kind of scary to ride a bike down Cully. So having a group that is already working to make sure their community is supported in being able to ride bikes, being able to walk in neighborhoods that aren't particularly walkable, and making sure that we support that group however we can is something that we're really dedicated to. And that includes one of our most recent hires, who is Bea. She lives in the Cully community. She works with us to make sure that her community has what it needs to be able to move around freely and well. If you have more questions about ABC, William has worked really closely with them, and we'll be happy to answer those when we get to my next slide, which is the very end. So where are we going? What's the next sort of iteration of this program? And I think these 4 programs that I've talked about here are where we're going in the broader term. Working to make sure that communities have the tools to advocate for themselves rather than people external to those communities coming in and sort of operating within a colonial framework to advocate for what we believe a community's needs are, but instead giving the tools of self-actualization to communities to make sure that they can advocate for what they want bike riding to look like in their community, because we have one view and their view might be entirely different than theirs. So making sure that the people in the communities are really the ones that are on staff with the community cycling center, and they're the ones advocating to city commissioners, and they're the ones advocating for bicycle policy more generally and more broadly as we move forward is really the direction that we're heading. Making sure that we're not just providing bikes to people, but we're using the bike to think about a way to engage active transportation more generally in these communities as they're communities of people, not just people who can potentially ride a bike and we have to teach them and give them a bike and then walk away from them. Because what it takes to actualize that community health is not just, sort of a bicycle. It's really infrastructure change. I mean, many of you are at this conference because you're interested in active transportation, and it's not just going to be, getting more bike lanes or more visibility for cyclists. It's really a whole of government effort to change what it means to get around a city. And right now, in a lot of those communities that are really far out east, for many people, it's not very practical to ride their bike, because not only is it far away, they face any number of marginalizing factors in their daily life, even in a car, and you add being on a bike to that, and it increases that marginalization by a great deal. So working to alleviate those factors of marginalization is to some extent something that people who aren't experiencing that can't do. So making sure that we are providing our platform to the people in those communities so that they can advocate for what they believe their future should be is our next step in creating more equitable, more socially just programming through the bike. Cool. Next, you actually get to see the icicle tricycle that William talked about earlier, which is very fun. There's just a cooler there in the front. And yeah, if you folks have any questions, feel free to ask them now. And if I think you'll have questions. So feel free to take a moment and generate questions and then ask them. Yeah, Madeline, if you want to start.
I just had a question about, so as you guys transition from fee-for-service into community camp, is there any concern in keeping the funding up for that and to keep it continuously going? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I was kind of anticipating a question about funding. Funding's it's a big challenge in the bicycle nonprofit world, and just the nonprofit world in general. I'm sure a lot of folks are aware of, but funding lasts 1 year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years if you're lucky. So it is really hard to show up consistently for communities when you know that the funding is operating on those cycles. So we're obviously with this shift, we're diving a lot deeper into the grants world. The fee-for-service camp had to operate at that high clip of a lot of participants because it had to move that many registered kids through to pay for the camp. And really that camp basically broke even for us. It was never a money maker. It's going to require a shift also on the fundraising end to get a lot more familiar and deeper into the grant writing.
Thanks.
I can speak to that a little bit also. Just when we had that kind of small scale community camp within our fee-for-service model, it really was just like a couple foundation grants that were keeping that sustained, like little 10K pots of money. And with that shift to focus our resources, all of our staff time on community camp comes with building out the systems where you can track your work, you can evaluate your work, you can demonstrate the need and the impact of your work that funders are looking for that you don't do in fee-for-service world, right? It's just not something that's required or needed. And so as that has happened over the past 3 years, we've been able to be more competitive applicants and go for these larger, 3-year, bigger pots of money grant cycles, whereas, we were kind of piecemealing it with these foundation grants before. We're in a much different situation now. So that's kind of, it pays off, I guess I would say.
Thanks for your presentation. I came a little late, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about Hub and what it was like reallocating an existing use, which sounds like it was maybe a parking lot or an abandoned lot, to another use. Did you have to go through zoning? I'm just curious about what was it like transforming the space and justifying the new use for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, none of us were around at that time. It was back in 2010. The property belongs to Home Forward Community Development Corporation, so it's the housing agency that runs all of the New Columbia housing in that part of the city. So it was a negotiation with them, and it was an agreement. But exactly how that was fleshed out, I'm not really sure. I know that right around when we were doing the understanding barriers to biking study, that's all kind of in that same time frame. So there most likely was conversations with Home Forward, and then we were supporting a community-based group called We All Can Ride at that time, which was made up of residents of New Columbia housing. And so I believe it was a conversation between us, Home Forward, We All Can Ride. And we ultimately decided with them to put in a skills park. And actually recently they've expressed some interest in removing that and putting in a traffic garden, just because the gravel and the dirt and the ramps next to the hub are just kind of dangerous. So that's probably the next thing that we're going to be doing with them based on community feedback.
Just as far as the zoning, I don't think anything really had to change because it was this lot that is part of like the community, the housing authority owned it anyway. And really like the repair hub is like, it's a shack. It's like this small little like kind of garage-esque space. And it's not a commercial use. It's free services to the community. So zoning-wise, it didn't really have to change. I think maybe we paid $1, the high price of $1 to, you know, put up the bike repair hub. Yeah, so that it was kind of like a unique, lucky, you know, community ties situation where the only things that had to change were conversations and materials. Yeah.
Well, I'll just offer a compliment. I was on the Planning Commission in Portland for a number of years, and the Barriers to Cycling report was really, really useful. In fact, that report, along with some good testimony by the folks from ABC, was really instrumental in letting us get upgrades to the bike parking zone passed a couple of years ago. So keep up the good work.
We're actually in the process, it should be coming out very soon now, our second study, and we're doing a Barriers to Biking East Portland study right now. So that's being funded by Metro, and that should be coming out any month now. Any other questions? Alrighty, I think that's all she wrote. So thank you all for coming, and yeah, reach out to us. Any parting words? All right, thank you so much.